Here's kind of where I am with the spring portal. It feels like the supply does not equal the demand, and because of the demand, there is, in some cases, I think some guys are probably getting more than what they would have gotten in December. It's a risk to go in at this point. I think we all look at that, Austin, but it certainly feels like some of the numbers that are just being, and you don't know what's true and what's not true, right? But it feels like at certain positions, some guys are doing better financially by going into spring than they would have if they had gone in December. Do you think that's a fair statement or not a fair statement?
Well, I think that's very fair. The tariffs are high in the spring portal clubs. I mean, like it is what it is. I mean, like they just as you said, supply demand. There's very few elite guys out there, if any. So you're talking about a lot of marginal players. I mean, think about the gnashing of teeth amongst Tennessee fans because the Tennessee didn't go all in on the BYU kid, whose best year was 475 yards receiving. I mean, like I don't know. I mean, last I checked, I just don't feel like that's high end receiver material. And again, Tennessee's biggest problem is the fact that they are searching for the fourth linebacker, the fifth defensive tackle, the fourth receiver, somebody in the secondary to be a backup. Like when you're searching for backups, but the money they're commanding is a lot. It doesn't behoove you to go that route. I mean, like I do think Tennessee needs a receiver. I do think Tennessee probably needs some help in a couple other areas for depth purposes. But like at what cost? And you could say, sure, just spend it. But I mean, but again, that's how you end up ruining your room. When some kid that comes in that does not play is making more money than the starter catching 10 touchdowns, all of a sudden that erodes the team chemistry or at least the room chemistry. So to me, that's where all this kind of there's a rub here, and that's the rub for a lot of this.
All right, we'll get into some of these names here a little bit because this is fluid, and so obviously things could change. Somebody could be scheduled to come in for a visit, ends up not coming in, or somebody not scheduled to come in comes in between the time we record this and the time it airs. So you got to be a little bit cautious with some of that stuff. But Grant, I want to ask you and Rob jump in, or Rob, I mean Austin jump in here too, in regards to. We don't know what rules are coming down the pike or not going to come down the pike, right, Grant? In terms of rev share and what this, I mean, are the quote bags for guys in both sports bigger this spring because of the pending rev share that's coming out? I mean, the basketball numbers seem pretty
Crazy.
loud, pretty crazy. I mean, I don't know if Kentucky's really at 20 million or whatever that number supposedly is. I mean, is everybody trying to get in front of that? And because of that, money's being spent at a much higher rate in both sports. Grant, starting with you.
I mean, I can speak for basketball, just the crazy. I think that is a pretty accurate number. People I've talked to about Kentucky's roster is talking at least 18 million. And just to consider, Ohio State in December, everybody was going crazy over a $20 million football roster. This is a 13 scholarship basketball roster that's pushing toward 20 million. There's been reports that there's a handful of teams that are already over 10 million plus on a roster. So the numbers that are, I mean, Rodney Rice, the number he got at USC, I mean, he was probably the third best player on the Sweet 16 team, and the number he got at USC was pretty crazy. So basketball wise, I don't really know what the jump, what leads to that if they are trying to get ahead of rev share and stuff like that. But the numbers for basketball this spring compared to the last couple of years feels like it's just exploded.
Well, they absolutely are, because with the whole clearinghouse thing that everybody says is going to go into effect. Again, this is all couched with the fact that that's the plan, right? To have this nice clearinghouse where the NIL deals go, and they're either checked off or they're thrown in the trash, and as pay for play. And so right now there is no such thing. So everybody is spending bigger and larger amounts this year in all sports. Before July 1, and so does that settle? I would tell you, yeah, maybe a little, but I also think that, kind of the old Jurassic Park, life finds a way. So what happens when you get to, when there are these rules? What happened in the past when there were rules? The schools found ways to do it under the table, and they'll get creative, and there's always people thinking of the next way to connect dots. And so that's where all this thing is going to be interesting to see where it takes you, because I think you're silly if you think that it's all going to go back and we're all just going to have this set number. I mean, to me, that's going to take literal legislation, and nobody's willing to do that because of the whole court system.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I don't understand why it behooves you to go through a bunch of money and let the market get way out of control.
I agree.
If you're not, I mean, because guys aren't going to take pay cuts next year, right? I mean,
Exactly.
are we going to come back to a kid that's making 7 figures and go, hey, rev shares here, you got that big money that first year, but now you got to take, half of that's gone or whatever because you're taking a pay cut here. I wonder if this is a little bit of, and I think it applies to both sports perhaps, if there's some new money in the market. And what I mean by that is some schools that didn't have money in the past in NIL feel like they have money with rev share coming. So there's more schools offering more kids than what you had the first real money than what you had in the early days of NIL, where it felt like there was some, who was organized, who was elite, kind of jump out there with a big budget, and some other schools couldn't compete even within your conference. But now those schools who couldn't compete early on feel like they've got some money they can compete with because they've planned for rev share as a rival. Fair or not fair?
I think that's fair. I think everybody kind of has money now. And again, eventually, I think everybody's going to have money, which goes back to old school recruiting. So you better have a staff that can recruit. If the staff is not a great recruiting staff and you are depending on the NIL side of this thing, then I think you're going to be feeling the pain, because I think ultimately, when everybody's kind of got similar numbers, then I think it gets back down to the pilot in the box.
Grant, when you think about where this thing is going, and we don't have any idea where it's going, is it a mistake to think that the market's going to settle? Like, hey, it's going to go back, and hey, this rev share is going to create, and this legislation arm is going to create some natural guidelines, and so instead of spending $18 million or $10 million on a basketball team, this year, next year it's gonna correct itself. I just don't I don't think a course correction is of any real magnitude is forthcoming. I don't. If you're spending $40 million on your student athletes across all sports, I don't think it's going to 30 million. I think there's a chance it's going to 50 million if you're going to remain competitive. That's what I think. Maybe you disagree, but that's what it feels like to me, is that we're not going the other direction. The toothpaste's not going back in the tube financially.
Right. I feel like you can't bank on course correction or kind of settling. I thought early in the portal era, when the numbers kept going up, that at some point it would kind of plateau and maybe settle down. And we've seen from the numbers, the number of athletes that are in the portal in all sports, they just keep going up every single year. It's crazy. So I don't know that you can expect money-wise that there's going to be any kind of course correction. And I agree with Austin. Like, you can put guidelines in place, but when that happens and they think everybody's playing by the same rules, there's going to be people that just work around the guidelines and figure out ways to, do it like they did in the past, like Austin's talked about, where you're just kind of skirting the rules and trying to do your own thing. So I think you can put guidelines in place, but I don't think you can expect or assume course corrections or money going down at any point. I mean, like you're talking about, how do you go back to a kid and say, take less money than you got, on that first deal, that first year, that first deal, whatever, when the numbers were so big in the past?
Well, here's what 30 years has taught me, Austin. There are people who there are elite people in roster acquisition who have found ways to be ahead of the rule, that they've been smarter than the people putting in the rules. It's a little bit like the old cycling world, back when they could get around all the testing. Right, that they were so far advanced, they were ahead of the rules makers. They were one step ahead. I think the good programs have been a step ahead of rules in whether it's recruiting or NIL or whatever for a long time. And I think the schools that were ahead of it when all this started jumped out in front and everybody's kind of caught up to level the playing field with the finances. But that doesn't mean there's any regulation in it. That just means that everybody's kind of sort of caught on to what everybody else is doing.
Are you telling me that everybody needs a Wizinator?
You know what I'm saying? Look, there are programs who are always ahead of whatever rule might be in place. I mean, that's playing in the gray or whatever you want to call it is just how athletics has worked for a long period of time in the amateur world of college athletics.
We use that term with air quotes and loosely. But I mean, I'm with you. That's why I said life finds a way. I mean, there's going to be schools that figure out a way to add to their pot, whatever that number is. They're going to find a way to add to their pot. Whether that's through legal NIL that's approved by the clearinghouse, through small businesses. Basically, Marty Bird that thing. You use the casino to launder the money. Like they're going to use the local businesses to push money towards kids, or through other ways. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it's done. If you're sitting back and you think it's all going to be normal, then maybe it will be. Maybe you'll be right, but there's also a possibility you're wrong, and at that point, you're getting lapped.